Well, folks, it is March 2nd, and we are still sitting here talking about the possibility of the West Virginia Mountaineers making the NCAA tournament. They got a big one coming up Tuesday night in the Little Apple, Manhattan, a matchup with the Kansas State Wildcats, a team they've already seen before. We're going to look back on that previous matchup. We're going to talk about keys to victory and what the Mountaineers need to do to get this thing done, the last true road game of the season, how they can come back to Morgantown Friday night for a matchup with UCF with a lot on the line as it relates to the NCAA tournament. Stick around for episode 158 of Mountaineer Moment. This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mountaineer Moment. My name's Troy. I am your host here, and this is your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. And as we said in that open, this is a game preview of West Virginia and the Kansas State Wildcats, West Virginia's final road game of the season. Obviously riding a bit of a high, coming off a ranked win at home to bust the current slump that they were riding, a 3-game losing streak, their longest of the season. They get right at home against A.J. DeBonsa and BYU to get back in the win column, to get back to 500 in Big 12 play. And there's just 2 games remaining, and both of these 2 games remaining are against teams that they've already seen and teams that they've already beaten. They took care of K-State way back when in late January and beat UC at home. They did that, and then beat UCF on the road. A massive comeback. That's happening Friday night in Morgantown. They're going to see them again. But first thing first, we're going to talk about this K-State game. And again, this is episode 158 of Mountaineer Moment. Hit that subscribe button for us. We would love for you to join this growing Mountaineer Moment community where all season long, if you've been with us all throughout basketball season, football season too, man, we preview and react to every single game. Every single game. Usually it's posted 40 or so minutes after the game goes final. And so that's the case with this one. So we're recording this one on Monday night, and West Virginia plays K-State on Tuesday night. So you can plan on coming back around Tuesday night or Wednesday morning for the reaction to that K-State West Virginia game. So again, hit that subscribe button for us and help us grow this community. Before we get too deep into the weeds of of K-State and this matchup and keys to victory and talking about the what we've seen from this offense, what we've seen from this defense, what we saw last time these two teams met, before we get too deep into the weeds of that conversation, we're going to get a little deep in the weeds of another conversation because it is March 2nd. It's the final week of the regular season. And coming after that BYU game, West Virginia is apparently on the tournament bubble. And so let's get all deep into the weeds of that yet again because, you know, it seems like just when you're ready to throw in the towel, or maybe it's just me, just when you're ready to give it up, just when you're ready to pack it in for next season, West Virginia punches back. And their backs certainly are still against the wall. Backs were against the wall when you hosted BYU on Saturday, and you came away with the win in that game. Offense played a lot better than it had. Defense played great in the first half and did some really, really good things down the stretch in the second half to secure that win against obviously a really talented team in BYU. And now you're back in the picture, and that's not just me making things up. That's not just other West Virginia fans or media making things up. Joe Lunardi, ESPN's bracketologist, the most well-known one in the business, has West Virginia as part of that next 4 out should the tournament start today. And so what that means, if you need a little refresher, haven't looked at that Joe Lunardi sheet in a while that he puts out now, it's like every day or sometimes twice a day with updates. There is, as far as the bubble is concerned, there's the last 4 byes, so teams that are just barely, maybe safely in the field. Joe Lunardi's last 4 teams in the field, which would play obviously in that first 4 in Dayton. There's the first 4 out and the next 4 out. And then there's like a little next group where West Virginia was since the Utah loss. Since you beat BYU, you're now part of that next 4 out, according to Joe Lenardi, and other bracketologists would have you in that place as well. Now, full disclosure, full context, something that tells the tale of the full story. Where you're at right now, if you're a West Virginia fan, if the season was cut a week shorter and there was no conference tournaments, right? The season ended yesterday and Selection Sunday was yesterday. You're not in the field. You're just not. You're part of that next 4 out, maybe at best at this point in time. Our first 4 out at best at this point in time. There's very few, if any, that would have you in the field at this moment. But the good news is the tournament selection show wasn't yesterday. The good news is you still have 2 regular season games that can help build your resume. And the good news is you still have the conference tournament remaining. So as you talk bubble, you think logistically, I mean, a Big 12 team in, the modern era, or however you want to, say that, with conference realignment and all that, no Big 12 team has finished with a record above 500 in conference and missed the NCAA tournament. West Virginia's 8-8. They win their last 2. They finish above 500. They finish 19-12, and then they go to Kansas City and see what they can do there. There's lots of deep weeds that we can get into relating to that, as far as what work you think would need to be done should they do that. Do they need to win 2 games in Kansas City? Do they need to win 3 games in Kansas City? What does that look like? What if they lose to Arizona or Houston or Iowa State? We kind of ran through some of those hypotheticals on that last episode after BYU. But the latest update, as far as Monday is concerned, the day before you play K-State on the road, the latest update there with Lenardi and some others is that win against BYU did what you were hoping it would. Certainly. You're hoping that with the last week of the regular season, you are in the conversation. You're not the focal point of the bubble conversation, to put it, kind of bluntly. You're getting a last mention in the conversation as a team to kind of look out for, but it's still an uphill battle. But should you, with your back against the wall, close the season strong, and by strong, I mean perfect, right? 3-0 down the stretch. Who knows where you'll be in a week when you tip things off in Kansas City and you're at 19-12 with more opportunities to add to your resume. Who knows where you will be? But it starts with K-State, and you have to get this one. And so we're going to talk about this game preview, obviously a little different from what we've done in the past. If you've been here for game previews where we give you a bunch of players and numbers and stats and some things to watch for, we'll give you little bits of that, just not in that specific structure and breakdown that we've done recently and for most of the games this season. But instead, as this is a team West Virginia has met, I actually went back and watched the tape on that West Virginia K-State matchup, and not that that's everything. Obviously, K-State doesn't even have the same coach that they did. Jerome Tang is gone. But PJ Haggerty is still there. He's still one of the premier players and scorers in the country. Having just played the number 1 scorer in the country, although the different positions, different play styles, completely different players. PJ Haggerty, although they're obviously not having the season that they'd hoped, he's, for lack of a better way of saying it, as important or as influential or as valuable. Again, they're 2-12 in conference, kind of hard to say, but he matters to K-State and what they like to do as much as AJ Devonsa does, or almost as much. And so we'll talk about PJ Haggerty and what he brings to the table. But first, because I did watch the film on that, and maybe I can jog your memory a little bit relating to that West Virginia K-State game that took place at Hope Coliseum way back on January 27th. So this was kind of a staple for West Virginia basketball in 2025-2026 as far as slow starts are concerned. West Virginia's first bucket came with 14 minutes and 5 seconds left in the first half. Fortunately, K-State wasn't exactly lighting it up, and so you didn't trail by much when your first bucket came. I believe they started the game. I think the graphic that flew up today when I was rewatching it. West Virginia started the game 2 for 13 from the floor. Maybe around the 10-minute mark, he had 8 points in the game, or maybe around the 12-minute mark with 8 minutes to go in the first half, you might have had about 8 to 10 points. It wasn't pretty offensively. And then there were two things relating to scorers, one from each side in the first half of that game that stick out. So down the stretch of the first half, Honor Huff, I'm pretty sure he knocked down 4 threes. He caught fire. Chance Moore got a little bit involved. Tracy Eaglestaff did some things in the second half that we'll get to, but it was really Honor Huff kind of sparking things for this offense that was in desperate need of a spark. And then on the other side, PJ Haggerty had a scoreless first half. There's a graphic that flashed up. He hadn't done that in 600-something days since he played against North Texas. So West Virginia, all after a 6-minute drought to start the game, and then, really not kicking things up until the 8-minute mark or so in the first half, West Virginia, because of Haggerty's 0 for 7 start in the first half, took a first half lead of 28-22 into the break. Now, the second half, a little bit, they didn't exactly light it up, right? West Virginia won that game 59-54, but things shifted where PJ Haggerty scored 16 points in the second half to make this a game. There was another, if you remember, this was the game where West Virginia had a 6-minute scoring drought to start the first half, and then in the middle of the second half had a 7-minute scoring drought, and then ended up winning the freaking game, which is pretty crazy. So it was Trace and Eaglestaff stepping up late. Brennan Lorient, he had 10 and 6 boards, 2 assists. Trace and Eaglestaff almost had a double-double, cup full. He had 3 offensive boards, a couple of them really timely down the stretch. 12 points, 9 boards for him. Chance Moore, 9 points. Honor Huff finished with 17. Again, most of that coming in the first half, though he had a step-back 3 to give West Virginia a 5-point lead with like a minute or so left. And it was a 3-point game with 15 seconds left. Haggerty threw up a 3, and I don't remember if it got partially blocked or he missed or what, but it didn't go in, and then they got fouled, and West Virginia ended up getting the thing done at the free throw line, 59-54, the final. But Kansas State came back from a halftime deficit on the road, missing a couple of their guys. David Castillo had 15 points in that one. He was really good, and missing some guys. It was a former coach in Jerome Tang, and they battled. And there were obviously moments where West Virginia's offense went so cold, K-State started making buckets, PJ Haggerty started making his shots. He was 50% down the stretch, over the course of the second half to finish with 16 points. And there were moments where it was like, West Virginia's not going to win this game. They're down 3 or 4, and there's a few minutes left, and your offense is ice cold, but somehow, some way, they found a way to get the job done, 59-54. So that's just a little summary on what this game was. It feels like it was early January to me. I don't know about you, but this was, just over a month ago, as we're early March now. This was a game back on January 27th that West Virginia won 59-54 to improve to 5-3 in conference play at that point, and they picked up win number 14 on the season, and obviously now sitting at 17-12, and in that NCAA tournament bubble conversation, I wanted to shift gears a little bit to just K-State and PJ Haggerty specifically, and just to show you that first half he got against West Virginia was such an outlier on the performances that he's had all season. But K-State, 11-18 overall, 2-14 in conference play, tied with Utah. And they trail, both Baylor and K-State, who have 5 wins. And so they're the bottom of the bottom in the Big 12 with 2 wins. K-State and Utah are holding that thing down. But K-State with PJ Haggerty, just to tell you what he's done, even in Big 12 play, dating back to early January, his lowest scoring total was, in fact, that number you're probably thinking, 16 points against West Virginia. And let me remind you, all of those came in the second half. There were a few performances. He's coming off a 9-point loss to TCU at home. Haggerty went 9 for 14, 7 boards, 5 assists, and 18 points. He had a 17-point outing and a big-time loss to Texas Tech on the road. He had 34 against Utah. He had 30 against TCU and a 2-point loss. 34 against Baylor, 15 of 23 from the floor and only 2 3-point attempts. That's pretty impressive in the 90-74 win just a couple weeks ago. So with all that said, PJ Haggerty, West Virginia was rather fortunate that he had the first half that he did against them, and I wouldn't expect that to happen. Expect that to happen again, but he was 6 for 19 from the floor, which was his worst. Looks to be close to. He didn't shoot it particularly well against Houston, 35% and 31% from the floor against West Virginia, so his worst field goal percentage game as well. So it was a rough stretch, and he's certainly looking forward to hosting the Mountaineers and turning that narrative around. For the guy that's averaging 23 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists, he is their guy. Make no mistake about it. Also for them, Nate Johnson, David Castillo, averaging double figures, 12 points and 10 points respectively. And David Castillo's, a guy that played really well. I mentioned that a moment ago in Morgantown. So keep eyes on him throughout the course of this game. And so that's K-State in a nutshell. Haggerty's their guy, and they're not having a great conference season in any way, shape, or form, 2-14. But have had some close calls. One of those close calls coming in Morgantown. So certainly not a matchup to take lightly for the Mountaineers. And as we transition to the West Virginia side of things here, we've already mentioned the stakes. Like, this is, I feel like we've said that a few times, but the BYU win and some other things going on around you on a bubble that's not particularly strong, are allowing you to still have life at this point. But this is a game you need to win. Unless you want to go and win the Big 12 tournament, which doesn't seem very likely because of how stacked the Big 12 is. This is a game that you really, it's must win. And it's on the road. It's against a team you should beat. Can they beat you? Absolutely. But they got 11 wins on the season. They have 2 wins in conference play. Let's go knock them off and take care of business. So how can West Virginia do that? So this offense over the last couple of games has been rather intriguing. And, West Virginia mentioned they put up 59 in that game against K-State, and that obviously wasn't stellar offense. West Virginia shot just 29% from 3, which is has been a trend throughout this season. Sometimes they've been worse than that. 23 of 55 from the floor, 42%. Out-rebounded K-State 38-31 and made 6 out of their 9 free throw attempts. K-State just shot 4 free throws in that previous matchup at the end of January. But watching that game back, and I get that it's really only a 2-game sample size, the last 2 games where West Virginia's offense has looked better, right? It's not long ago they were held to just 54 points against TCU on the road, held to 56 against Utah. But against Oak State in overtime, you scored 84 points. Against BYU, you scored 79. 2 teams that like to run a little bit or a lot of bit, and you took to that and said, all right, we're going to take our chances and we're going to run with you here and there. And it worked. And, it's not – that's a major chunk of it, but that's not the only thing that we should take away from West Virginia's last 2 offensive performances. It's not that they scored more solely because – solely because they were getting more shots and running. West Virginia made 8 of 25 from 3 against BYU, but they got to the free throw line, 17 of 22, 77%. They probably haven't done that all season long, Big 12 play, with that amount of shots. Against Oklahoma State, they made 12 of 31 from downtown, did the Mountaineers, and shot at nearly 50% from the floor. Oak State, not a great defense. K-State, not a great team. And so that can be replicated because West Virginia played that game against Oklahoma State on the road. And so, can this, to me, one of the keys, and we'll talk about it here as we conclude this episode, but one of the keys to me is, simply put, making shots. I like to think, we don't know, because there very well could be another game or two or three that West Virginia scores in the 50s. But you'd like to think that maybe there's a rhythm being found, again, albeit super late in the season. But look at the NBA, and I get it's a completely different conversation, but like sometimes new teams don't click and don't gel until 40 games into the season. The midway point for an NBA team. Well, maybe sometimes for the Mountaineers, maybe you don't gel until March, and that would be the beautiful thing. We'd rather play our best basketball now than we were in November or December. So offensively, it's as simple as shot making and not turning the ball over. I think another key for West Virginia will be foul trouble, especially like Brennan Laurent, Chance Moore, and Jasper, right? Some guys that can sometimes get 2 fouls, and then it hurts you a lot. Brennan Laurent picked up 2 fouls early in that K-State game and sat a lot of that first half. So, you got to stay out of foul trouble. You got to take care of the basketball, limit turnovers, make shots. And how you choose to defend PJ Haggerty is certainly something. I remember pre-game or the day before the game, and Ross Hodges' press conference, kind of the conversation with AJ DeBonsa was like, okay, do you choose to, not really let him beat you, but do you choose to, take away his passing and make him one-dimensional and let him score 35, but no one else really do much of anything and try and win the game that way? Or do you double team him every time, make him pass a lot, make other guys beat you by making shots? What's it going to be? And I thought West Virginia did a really good job of kind of keeping everybody on their toes, because there was some, especially in the second half, DeBonsa scored, and there were some one-on-one matchups that he just exploited. But West Virginia was like, all right, we'll live with that. And then there were times there was just I remember a couple slow motion graphics that they replayed, and it was like there's 6 eyes that are on DeBonsa, not going to let him get to the rim easy. And so I think they did a good job of kind of mixing things up. At least that's how it appeared to me. Sometimes it was solely one-on-one. Sometimes it was, you're not coming in here without us putting up a fight. And I get that PJ Haggerty's a different guy, but you're coming off of playing the number 1 scorer in the country, and now you're playing the number 3 scorer in the country, PJ Haggerty. He's averaging over 23 and held to 16 just over a month ago, and he's ready to get at you again. He scored all 16 of those in the second half. He just said that. And so I think there's some things that you can take from that game, as silly as it sounds, in defending AJ DeBonsa and applying that to Haggerty. What are you going to live with? How many eyes are going to be focused on when the ball's in his hands? Because it's going to be in his hands a lot. He's averaging 4 assists. Well, so is DeBonsa. Like, what's it going to look like? And for Jasper Floyd, who will likely be the primary defender, how can he stay out of foul trouble? How can he be smart? And then how can he switch guys on to Haggerty at times to give Jasper a break? So, I think you don't want to, I don't know, I feel like maybe, might be a little crazy to say this, but with how talented Haggerty is, with how well he scored this season, he's shooting near 50% from the floor. For a guy that's on a bad team averaging 23 points, I mean, that's pretty remarkable too, because everybody knows the game plan for him, and yet he's still being pretty efficient. As a team that's on the bubble in their last road game, playing as a team that's 2-12 in conference, and you want to come back to Morgantown Friday night for a pumped-up Coliseum to close out the regular season with an opportunity to beat UCF, a team that's in the tournament, continue to build that resume, get a quad 1 win, you continue the story and get to Kansas City fired up for your chances and feeling pretty good about it. You don't want to go to Kansas City on a Tuesday night and let Haggerty drop 40 on you and win the game by 7 or win the game, period. And so, to me, that needs to be the first kind of point of emphasis, first priority, however you want to describe that. stopping PJ Haggerty, limiting him somehow to where you're not jumping back on the plane from Manhattan. I said Kansas City, I think, from Kansas State, Manhattan, and shaking your head going, man, we really let that guy beat us, and he was the only one that could have beat us, and he did. You don't want that. So focus on him, game plan on him. He's going to make some shots. He proved that in the second half last time we played them. But stay the course. And, DeBonsa had a pretty good game against West Virginia, but he didn't have a game where he took over and won the game because we didn't let him, frankly. There were some moments where he, made four shots in a row in the second half, and you're like, oh boy, but you stayed the course. Didn't get too high, didn't get too low, and you end up winning that game. And I think it needs to be a similar approach against PJ Haggerty, and I think West Virginia, it's beneficial to go from the nation's leading scorer to the third leading scorer in the nation as far as game planning is concerned. So that's another key for West Virginia. And then, last thing we'll mention, just all-encompassing, big picture bubble conversation here. We keep jumping back to this word opportunity for West Virginia. And, 2 weeks ago, before you played Utah and went on a 3-game losing skid against them in Oak State and TCU, we were like, all right, we're right there. We're in the conversation for the tournament. Then you drop 3 straight, and it's like, well, we're kind of done. Then you knock off a ranked team at home, and it's like, we're kind of back. Right? You might not be as high as you were pre-Utah, but you are in the conversation enough to know that if you take care of business one game at a time, you knock off K-State, you come back home Friday and collect a win any way, shape, or form, somehow get a W in that win column, you're feeling a lot better. A lot of ifs. I get it. But we're in the last week of the regular season, and this team is still alive. This team is not dead yet. Simply put, not dead yet. Uphill battle, work to do, sure. Insurmountable, absolutely not. So, I think it was Honor Huff postgame who, he didn't say that, against BYU, like as far as like their backs being against the wall, I don't think that was the direct quote, but just spoke to this. He said, we're not being naive to the fact that we need to win. And if we want to get to the NCAA tournament, we need to win games. And so here's 2 more games this week. It starts against K-State. Go win the freaking game and come back to hopefully what'll be a pumped up, sold out crowd. Going to help you knock off UCF too. So we'll have you covered, though, post-game reaction and analysis to West Virginia K-State. Hope that you'll join us back here on Mountaineer Moment. That'll be episode 159. But here for episode 158, again, my name's Troy. Hit that subscribe button, man. Continue to grow this channel, Mountaineer Moment. So appreciative. And we will see you next time. Let's go Mountaineers.